Most people who eat oatmeal for breakfast are already making a smart choice. The science is clear. Oatmeal lowers cholesterol, stabilizes blood sugar, and reduces cardiovascular risk in ways that very few other breakfast foods can match. But here is what almost nobody realizes. That bowl of oatmeal you are eating every morning is only operating at perhaps 30% of its true heart protective potential. Because there is one single ingredient, a bright golden powder that has been used in traditional medicine for over 4,000 years. That modern cardiology research is now validating with clinical trial after clinical trial, and that costs less than $1 for a month's supply, that when added to your oatmeal transforms it into one of the most powerful artery-protecting, plaque-fighting, inflammation-crushing meals that nutritional science has ever documented. That ingredient is turmeric, and specifically, the active compound within it called curcumin. Cardiologists who study curcumin describe its effects on arterial health in terms they rarely use about any natural compound. Researchers who analyze its molecular mechanisms call it one of the most multi-targeted anti-cardiovascular disease agents ever identified in nature. And the most extraordinary part is that this golden powder has been sitting in the spice rack of billions of kitchens around the world for centuries, used to color rice and flavor curries, while its power to literally clean, protect, and rejuvenate the arteries was hiding in plain sight. Today, that hiding ends. The invisible war inside your arteries. To truly appreciate what turmeric does for your arteries, you need to first understand what is happening inside them right now, silently, painlessly, and progressively, in the vast majority of adults living on a modern diet. Atherosclerosis, the medical term for the hardening and narrowing of the arteries through plaque accumulation, is not a disease that announces itself. It is a slow, decades-long process that begins with a microscopic injury to the endothelium, the paper-thin single-cell layer that lines the interior of every artery in the body. This injury can be caused by oxidized LDL cholesterol, elevated blood sugar, high blood pressure, cigarette smoke, or the chronic low-grade inflammation that is now understood to be nearly universal in adults eating a Western-style diet. Once the endothelium is injured, the immune system responds by sending white blood cells called monocytes to the site of damage. These monocytes transform into macrophages, the cleanup crew of the immune system, and begin ingesting the oxidized LDL that has accumulated at the injury site. But when macrophages become overloaded with oxidized lipids, they transform into what pathologists call foam cells, bloated, dysfunctional immune cells that cannot complete their cleanup mission and instead die at the site, leaving behind a growing core of lipid debris, inflammatory proteins, and cellular wreckage that becomes the foundation of an atherosclerotic plaque. Over years and decades, these plaques grow, calcify, and narrow the arterial channel through which blood must flow. The most dangerous moment is not when the plaque is largest. It is when a vulnerable, inflamed plaque ruptures, triggering the formation of a blood clot that can block the artery entirely, producing a heart attack or stroke within minutes. Turmeric and its active compound curcumin intervene in this process at multiple critical points simultaneously. And that multi-targeted action is precisely what makes it so remarkable. How curcumin fights arterial inflammation at the molecular level. The primary reason turmeric is so powerfully cardioprotective comes down to curcumin's extraordinary ability to suppress the master inflammatory switch inside human cells, a protein complex called nuclear factor kappa B, or NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B is the central regulator of the inflammatory gene expression cascade. When it is activated, by oxidized LDL, by high blood sugar, by environmental toxins, by excess body fat. It switches on dozens of genes that produce pro-inflammatory cytokines, adhesion molecules that recruit more immune cells to arterial walls, and enzymes that degrade the structural integrity of plaque caps, making them vulnerable to rupture. Chronically elevated NF-kappa B activity is now understood to be one of the most fundamental molecular drivers of cardiovascular disease progression. Curcumin is one of the most potent natural NF-kappa B inhibitors ever identified. Research published in the journal Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology demonstrated that curcumin directly blocks the activation of NF-kappa B in arterial endothelial cells and in the macrophages that form the core of atherosclerotic plaques. By silencing this master inflammatory switch, curcumin simultaneously reduces the production of interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and C-reactive protein, the primary blood markers of cardiovascular inflammation that cardiologists use to assess heart attack and stroke risk. A clinical trial published in the journal Nutrition Research found that curcumin supplementation for 8 weeks produced significant reductions in serum C-reactive protein levels in participants with metabolic syndrome, reductions comparable in magnitude to those achieved with statin medications, but without the muscle pain, liver strain, and metabolic side effects that lead many patients to discontinue statin therapy. When you add turmeric to your morning oatmeal, you are beginning every single day by delivering this NF-kappa B suppression signal to the endothelial cells lining your arteries before the inflammatory stimuli of the day have a chance to gain their foothold. Curcumin and cholesterol. The oxidation prevention story. Beyond its anti-inflammatory effects, curcumin exerts a second and equally important protective action on cardiovascular health through its relationship with cholesterol, specifically through its ability to prevent the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. As established earlier, it is not circulating LDL cholesterol in its native state that initiates atherosclerotic plaque formation. It is oxidized LDL that has been chemically damaged by free radicals, that embeds in arterial walls and triggers the immune cascade that forms plaques. Preventing LDL oxidation is therefore one of the most upstream and consequential interventions possible in cardiovascular disease prevention. Curcumin is a direct-acting antioxidant of extraordinary potency. Its molecular structure allows it to neutralize multiple categories of free radicals simultaneously, including superoxide, hydroxyl radicals, and peroxynitrite, all of which are capable of oxidizing LDL in the bloodstream. Research published in the Indian Journal of Physiology and Pharmacology demonstrated that curcumin supplementation significantly reduced levels of oxidized LDL in human subjects, while simultaneously increasing the activity of the body's own endogenous antioxidant enzymes, superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase, that provide ongoing protection against oxidative stress. This dual action, direct free radical neutralization combined with upregulation of the body's internal antioxidant defense system, creates a comprehensive shield around circulating LDL that dramatically reduces the formation of the oxidized LDL that atherosclerosis depends on. Combined with oatmeal's beta-glucan fiber, which reduces the total amount of LDL in circulation by trapping bile acids, the combination creates a breakfast that attacks arterial plaque formation from 2 distinct and complementary directions simultaneously. The endothelial function revolution, nitric oxide and arterial flexibility. One of the most exciting and clinically significant areas of curcumin research involves its effects on endothelial function, the ability of the arterial wall to produce nitric oxide and respond dynamically to the body's changing blood flow demands. Nitric oxide is the molecule that signals the smooth muscle cells surrounding arteries to relax, allowing the vessel to dilate and increase blood flow in response to exercise, stress, or increased metabolic demand. Healthy endothelial function, robust nitric oxide production, and responsive arterial dilation is one of the strongest predictors of long-term cardiovascular health. Endothelial dysfunction, conversely, is one of the earliest measurable signs of developing cardiovascular disease and is associated with dramatically elevated risk of heart attack and stroke. A landmark randomized controlled trial published in the journal Nutrition Research and Practice found that curcumin supplementation significantly improved flow-mediated dilation, the gold standard clinical measurement of endothelial function, in postmenopausal women, a population at particularly elevated cardiovascular risk due to the loss of estrogen's protective effects on the arterial wall. The improvement in endothelial function observed with curcumin was comparable to that produced by aerobic exercise training, a finding that cardiologists have described as genuinely startling. The mechanism involves curcumin's ability to activate endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that produces nitric oxide in arterial wall cells, while simultaneously protecting nitric oxide from being destroyed by the oxidative stress that cardiovascular disease generates. In practical terms, turmeric in your morning oatmeal is helping your arteries stay flexible, responsive, and open. Properties that are the living definition of cardiovascular youth, regardless of your chronological age. Blood pressure, triglycerides, and the complete cardiovascular picture. The cardiovascular benefits of regular curcumin consumption extend further still into blood pressure regulation and triglyceride management, two additional pillars of arterial health that oatmeal alone does not comprehensively address. A meta-analysis published in the journal Pharmacological Research, pooling data from multiple randomized controlled trials, found that curcumin supplementation produced statistically significant reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, particularly in participants with existing hypertension or elevated cardiovascular risk. The proposed mechanisms involve curcumin's ability to reduce the activity of angiotensin-converting enzyme, the same enzyme targeted by a major class of antihypertensive prescription medications, while simultaneously reducing the arterial stiffness and inflammatory endothelial damage that elevate blood pressure resistance. On the triglyceride front, research published in the journal Complementary Therapies in Medicine found that curcumin supplementation significantly reduced fasting triglyceride levels in participants with metabolic syndrome, reducing the blood viscosity and small dense LDL particle formation that elevated triglycerides promote and that further accelerate the progression of arterial plaque. When these blood pressure and triglyceride benefits are added to curcumin's anti-inflammatory, antioxidative, cholesterol protective, and endothelium supporting effects, the complete picture that emerges is of a single natural compound simultaneously addressing every major modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular disease, in a teaspoon of golden powder stirred into a bowl of morning oatmeal. The bioavailability problem and how to solve it. Here is the critical practical issue with turmeric and curcumin that most people who add it to their food never know about. And that determines whether they receive its full therapeutic benefit or only a fraction of it. Curcumin in its natural form is poorly absorbed by the human digestive system. Studies have shown that plain curcumin consumed without any absorption enhancer passes largely through the gastrointestinal tract without being taken up into the bloodstream in clinically meaningful quantities. This is why populations who eat turmeric regularly in traditional cuisines have historically combined it with two specific companions, black pepper and fat, that solve the bioavailability problem completely. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine that inhibits the liver enzymes and intestinal transporters responsible for rapidly breaking down and eliminating curcumin before it can be absorbed. Research published in the journal Planta Medica demonstrated that adding just a small amount of piperine to curcumin increased its bioavailability in human subjects by an extraordinary 2,000%. A small pinch of black pepper, so small you will not taste it, added to your turmeric oatmeal is the difference between consuming turmeric decoratively and consuming it therapeutically. The second bioavailability enhancer is fat. Curcumin is fat-soluble, meaning it is absorbed far more effectively when consumed alongside dietary fat. Adding a tablespoon of nut butter, a small handful of walnuts, or a drizzle of coconut oil to your turmeric oatmeal ensures that curcumin dissolves into the fat matrix present in the digestive tract and is absorbed through the lymphatic system with dramatically improved efficiency. The optimal approach is to add 1 teaspoon of high-quality ground turmeric powder, standardized to contain at least 3 to 5% curcumin, to your cooked oatmeal, along with a small pinch of black pepper and a source of healthy fat. For flavor enhancement, a drizzle of raw honey, a handful of fresh or frozen mango pieces, or a sprinkle of cinnamon complement the warm, earthy flavor of turmeric beautifully while adding their own independent cardiovascular benefits. This golden oatmeal combination is not just medicine disguised as breakfast. It is genuinely one of the most delicious and satisfying ways to start a heart-healthy day. What the science says about long-term use. One of the most reassuring aspects of turmeric as a daily cardiovascular intervention is its exceptional long-term safety profile. Turmeric has been consumed as a daily dietary staple by hundreds of millions of people across South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East for thousands of years without evidence of toxicity or serious adverse effects at culinary doses. Clinical trials examining curcumin supplementation at doses far exceeding what would be consumed through dietary turmeric have consistently reported excellent tolerability with no significant adverse effects in the vast majority of participants. The safety contrast between curcumin and pharmaceutical cardiovascular medications, which carry risks of muscle damage, liver toxicity, gastrointestinal bleeding, and electrolyte imbalance, is profound and clinically meaningful, particularly for older adults managing multiple health conditions simultaneously. It is worth noting that individuals taking blood-thinning medications should discuss regular high-dose turmeric supplementation with their physician, as curcumin has mild antiplatelet properties that can complement anticoagulant therapy. At culinary doses, 1 teaspoon added to oatmeal, this interaction is not a significant concern for most people, but the conversation with a healthcare provider is always the responsible recommendation for those on prescription anticoagulants. Motivational conclusion. The arteries that carry blood from your heart to every organ, every muscle, and every cell in your body are not inert pipes. They are living, dynamic, responsive tissues that are shaped, day by day, meal by meal, by every choice you make at the breakfast table. The golden powder that ancient healers called the spice of life and that modern cardiologists are now studying with growing admiration does not require a prescription, does not cost a fortune, and does not demand any dramatic change to the morning routine you already have. It asks only for a teaspoon, a pinch of black pepper, and the willingness to believe that something this simple, this ancient, and this affordable could truly be this powerful. The science says it can. Your arteries are waiting for you to act on that knowledge. Start tomorrow morning, and let the healing begin one golden bowl at a time.